Hi, and welcome to this live reading of Rebel Jewel from the Jewel Chronicles Book 3 by Natalia Reis, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, The Call Home. The smell of blood suffocated him. There was no running from it. It surrounded him, tightening its nauseating grip on Jolly's senses, clinging to his nostrils, not letting him go. Where is Melinda? Jolly scanned the area around him, his glance bouncing off objects and undefined shapes, straining through the red fog closing in on him. Even the mist was tinted with blood, snaking over the wet ground, the exhale of a hidden monster. Melinda was nowhere to be seen. His heart pumped harder, the drumming echoing in his ears, deafening and frantic. He tried to move, but invisible hands held him steadfast, feet rooted to the dirt-covered ground, unseen shackles around his ankles, breaking through skin and digging into his flesh. No, not again. With all the strength he had left, Jolly pulled and pushed against whatever held him in place, the sting of wounded flesh shooting up his legs, a feeling all too familiar to him. He was enslaved again. He thrashed harder, blood now running down to his bare feet, warm and frightening. A shadow emerged from the fog. Melinda! But no, it couldn't be. Its frame was too tall and broad. Jolly opened his mouth to yell for help, but the word never left his lips. Panic rose inside of him, insidious and overwhelming. Why had they returned to Africa? He had warned his wife it was too dangerous. Too many people wanted them dead. The shadowy figure took shape as it approached him, brown legs the size of tree trunks and long arms to match. No. The sight of an impressive bald head choked him. It couldn't be. The Duvel was dead. And yet, there he was, striding toward him like an out-of-control transport. Jolly yelled out, his voice freed from whatever was muting it, and pulled harder on the invisible chains holding his ankles. To no avail. The shackles held steady as if glued to the ground. The slaver proceeded toward him, a cruel smirk curling the corners of his lips. I've got you now, my beautiful boy. You can't run this time. Nyama threw his massive weight into his stride, coming closer and closer to Jolly. It's been too long. Ready to give me some of that milky goodness? You're dead, Jolly screamed, his voice absorbed by the thick fog. It's not possible. The large man took a few more steps, a growl-like chuckle leaving his lips. Well, I'm not. And I missed you, little white boy. My friends missed you too. From the thickest part of the fog, where the blood seemed to coagulate into disgusting blobs, a few more shadows appeared, coalescing into several human bodies, both male and female, all unwelcome echoes of his past. The slaver had brought his cronies. No, you're dead. Jolly's voice came out as a sob, a heart-wrenching plea to whatever gods were listening. I killed you. The group of human shadows united in their progress toward him. It's about time we have ourselves a good orgy. Nyama glanced at his friends. Any preference about who does the boy first? He couldn't be sure. The ear-splitting scream he heard came from himself. Jolly closed his eyes tight and, like a mantra, repeated the words. It's not possible. You're dead, Duvel. This is only a nightmare. Well, you should have stayed in Isvareld, a familiar female voice said. You wouldn't be going through this again. Fearfully, Jolly opened his eyes. The slaver and his friends were gone, and Freya was in their place, her barely covered body resting sensually on a padded bench. What was she doing in Africa? Yes, it's me, handsome. The goddess covered a yawn with a graceful hand. You wouldn't yield to me while you could, and now you're fodder for these savages. You could have had all this. Freya ran a hand suggestively along her body. Instead, You're going to be ravished by animals. They're not real, Johari said, not sure he was talking to the goddess or himself. You're not real. What about all this blood? The goddess asked, sweeping a hand in front of her. You should have stayed in Israel under my protection. Now you have no wife, no child, and spilled the blood of thousands upon this land. She pointed at the bloody fog around them. Johari shook his head. No, Melinda is safe. Johari is safe. This is just a nightmare. Freya threw her head back, the crystal-like sounds of her laughter echoing through the thick, stifling air. I've always liked you, Johari. I wish you had stayed. And she was gone. Melinda! Miskana! He called, desperation taking a firmer hold on him. Where was his wife? Was Freya telling the truth? Had he lost the two people he loved more than life itself? Out of the threatening fog, the hooded figures of the elders emerged, their faces in shadow and hands hidden in the wide sleeves of their clothes. Johari watched their slow procession toward him, the humming of their voices resonating inside his head, just like during the trials. He closed his eyes and opened them again, hoping they'd be gone, but they still advanced, human lava coming to destroy him. Contender, listen carefully. The voices came from inside his head, not from the moving men. Your wife doesn't belong on the throne of Natalia, aberration that she is. And your daughter, she's neither Natalian or Fjordan. We don't have room for freaks of nature, tainted bloods. We've eliminated them both. We'll let you live, though, so you can contemplate the consequences of your ill-advised actions for the rest of your life in Dent. You'll be sold to the highest bidder. All his energy had been depleted. Without Melinda or Johari, he was an empty vessel. Tears rolled down his cheeks, pooling in the corners of his nose and dripping on his lips. He closed his eyes again. Maybe, if he lay down face first in the lake of blood collecting around his ankles, he'd be blessed with the oblivion of death. Johari. Someone shook him, but he didn't want to open his eyes. There was nothing left for him to see on this earth. But the voice insisted, and warm hands gripped his shoulders and shook him again. Wake up, Johari. You're having that nightmare again. Reality slowly sank in, and with it, a wave of pure joy surged through his whole being. He opened his eyes to his beautiful wife, looking at him with a slight frown, her green eyes clouded with worry. It was a nightmare, nothing else. Still sobbing, he drew Melinda into his arms and hugged her tightly, his quivering lips finding shelter in the crook of her neck. I'm so happy you're here, he said, voice choked with emotion. His wife was alive, and so was his daughter. Nayama was in my dream, coming for me again. The elders had killed. His voice halted, not able to say the words. Melinda brushed a hand over the back of his head, smoothing his hair and his fears. Shh, Wimbo Wamayo. It was just a dream. Nayama is dead, and we're fine. We're better than fine. We're all together and happy. His sobs turned into laughter as he pulled away from his wife and feasted his eyes on her amber skin, her full pink lips, and the emeralds of her eyes. I love you. Their lips came together in a long, desperate kiss. He had been drowning in sorrow just minutes before. Now, he needed her flavor, her touch to swim back to the surface, to hold on to life. His nightmares had returned recently, and he was all too afraid it would mean only one thing. They would soon be called back to Africa. Johari didn't know Melinda's feelings on the matter, as they both avoided talking about the inevitable return to her homeland for fear of bursting their happy bubble. All he knew was that he was not ready. Leave Mjusi alone, Johari. The poor Msitu is exhausted. Melinda tried to make her voice sound stern and authoritative, but a smile crept to her lips instead. She couldn't resist the crystalline giggle of her daughter as she wobbled after the small dragon. Spring was in full bloom, and the air had grown warm enough for Melinda to shed her restricting winter clothes and don her beloved conga dresses. She and Johari had gone to the forest to gather mushrooms, but the excursion had taken a lot longer than Melinda had expected. Her daughter was a small ball of energy that never stopped. She had spent more time chasing after Johari than actually hunting for the fungi. While chasing Manjusi, Johari's little legs gave in under her, and she fell on her well-padded bottom, lifting a small cloud of dirt around her. At first surprised, the toddler soon recovered and began gathering handfuls of soil and throwing it up in the air. It fell on her curly silver hair and bare legs like a brown rain shower that made the child giggle again. Melinda laughed, shaking her head. "Look at the mess you're making, child. Thank the gods it's not mud, or you'd look just like a little hippocalf by now." Johari stopped for a moment and looked at her mother, her bright green eyes sparkling in the afternoon sun. "Mama pretty," she said with a giggle. Melinda's heart melted, and bending down, she brushed the dirt off her daughter's plump little body. "Let's go, Mdogo. Your father probably thinks we have been eaten by a lynx." Melinda scooped her daughter from her dirt throne, and as she propped Johari on one hip, the child leaned over and placed an open-mouthed kiss on her mother's lips. "You sloppy kisser," Melinda said, wiping her lips with her free hand. "You're lucky I love you so much." Melinda swooped the toddler onto her back, wrapping a large piece of conga cloth around both of them. "It will be dark soon, and he'll be worried." She tied the edges of the cloth over her chest and with a final bounce, adjusted her daughter's little body against her back. She loved feeling Johari's warmth on her own skin. It reminded the princess of when she was carrying the baby inside her. Mjusi shook his long tail and made the funny clicking sounds he often made when he was happy. He was as patient with the toddler as he had been with Melinda when they were both little. They began their journey out of the woods and into the prairie, where the river raced them like a little tyke happy to be free of winter shackles. Her daughter's warm breath caressed the back of her neck as they walked home, while Mjusi followed them half walking, half flying. As they approached Hapas, a small figure came scrambling toward them, tripping over its tail with every other step. "Look, it's Gava. She missed you." Johari wiggled on her back, uttering nonsensical words. "All right, I'll let you down." Melinda set the basket with the mushrooms down and untied the conga fabric from around her, carefully depositing her daughter on the ground. The baby dragon pounced on the little girl and proceeded to lick her face with a rough, long, forked tongue. Johari's delighted laughter spilled off her like popping bubbles. Melinda draped the cloth over her shoulder and stared at the tall shape of her husband as it cut through the early evening horizon. Her heart still skipped a beat or two every time she laid eyes on Jolly. More than 2 years had passed since their wedding, and yet her matangazos still lit up like a chandelier in his presence. She watched him come closer, the slight limp in his step a sad reminder of his time in the desert, fighting for the right to her hand in marriage. "Mskana, I was worried." Jolly opened his arms, and Melinda threw herself into their shelter, wrapping hers around his neck. He bent down and gently took her lower lip between his before covering it completely with his mouth. The feeling never changed. Jolly's lips were as familiar to her as her own. His arms and his kiss felt like home no matter where they were or whatever danger they were facing. She moaned against him, surrendering as she always did to his body and soul, the words "I love you" never too far from her lips. "Johari made me chase her all over the woods. You know how she gets, Wimbo Wamayo." He kissed the top of her head and laughed. "That's our little monkey. Too much energy, no sense." Mjusi had wrapped his body around their legs, asking for attention. "Yes, I missed you too, Mjusi," Jolly said, bending down a bit to pet the dragon. With Johari scampering in front of them, closely followed by the baby dragon, Melinda and Jolly made their way to their cottage hand in hand. The sun was beginning to fade in the horizon. It wouldn't totally disappear, not in the spring in his world, when the days became longer and the nights short-lived. Soon there would be only white nights, when the light of the candles was not necessary to guide their steps. "Ebba brought us rabbit stew," Jolly told her, tucking her closer to him. "It smells delicious. Are you hungry?" "I'm famished." She hadn't eaten since before they left to go to the woods late morning. Thank the gods for Ebba. If we were dependent on my cooking, we would have starved by now. Melinda was being too modest. Even though she had been brought up in a palace with servants to do her bidding, she had learned how to cook since then and was not without skill in the kitchen. Melinda loved their little cottage by the river. It was small, but it had been the first place she had been totally happy for the first time in her life. After months of nothing but heartache, and to set some roots and focus on each other. She knew it wouldn't last. In fact, she was surprised it had lasted this long. Knowing the goddesses who had taken her and her family under their wings, she fully expected to have been swept across the ocean by now.